What's up, humans? Welcome to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain. My co-hosts are Tesco and Rip Kinney, and we are all music producers, artists, and producer coaches. This show is where we discuss all things music production and interview amazing creatives about their origins, their process, and whatever else comes up. This week is episode 114, Christian Caicedo on sound selection and engineering. Christian Caicedo is an audio engineer at Envious Audio and host of the podcast Electronic Dance Money. He talked to us about inheriting a love of dance music from his parents, dealing with impostor syndrome based off unrealistic expectations, how the Producer Dojo helped him become a better engineer, starting his mixing and mastering business, the importance of the business side of the music industry, why you are focused on the wrong music stats, why support from other artists and shows is the most important stat, how crucial mentorship is, finding the point of diminishing returns on songwriting, the importance of having organization and systems, and how sound selection is the most important part of engineering your song. Follow Christian at Envious Audio on Instagram, and you can check out his engineering services at enviousaudio.com and find the podcast at enviousaudio.com/podcast. The song of the week is Beat Eater by Hypedelic, engineered by Christian, and it made it on to being released by Hybrid Trap. Big deal. So make sure you go check out the links to that below, or the whole Song of the Week Spotify playlist. We got a link for that too. Support our sponsors, Dojo TV. That's where we recorded this one. You could have been in the chat with us. That's free producer live stream classes from the Dojo Senseis and this podcast every other week. Tesco's Patreon, where you can get access to his Discord, track feedback, private lessons, and much more. Learn from the boy Tesco. Weekly download, where you can learn from our mentor Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to almost 350 episodes in the archive already for just $20 a month. Best producer deal on the internet. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. Hit up thehumanmusicpodcast.com for more socials, free sound packs, and finding our other streaming sites. But let's get on into this episode with Christian Caicedo.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. We're live! What's up, humans?
Back again.
Yeah. We are here, and I am really excited. We're here with Christian Caicedo, host of the Electronic Dance Money Podcast. Big, warm welcome. Woo!
What is up? Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yes. Come on. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, man, super pumped to have you on. We all dig your podcast, and we were super pumped when you reached out to us and said you wanted to be on here. So thank you so much for reaching out. Really appreciate that. And just to let you know, we are also live on Dojo TV right now. So we got some people coming into the chat. What's up?
Shout out.
We got Benunny up in there. We got Blunter S. Wompson, of course. And I'm sure we'll get some more people chiming in a minute with some questions and some dope gifts, and we'll keep you updated on that. But yeah, you know how we start this. The first thing we do is say, Christian, what is your superhero origin story, and how did you become the amazing creative that you are today?
Oh man. All right. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but
we got time. We got up to an hour and 45 minutes. So do whatever you want.
I fucking rant. So if you guys ever need to interrupt, just interrupt, because I will rant. But first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. Of course. Yeah. This is going to be a lot of fun. Your guys' episodes kind of, some of your topics follow along with what I do on my podcast. But let's see. So growing up, my background, so right now I do pretty much mostly mixing and mastering for EDM producers, but then I also do some creative marketing and coaching for creative businesses. And I'm working with some producers right now on helping them market their own music, basically setting up ads, running ads, and kind of pushing people to playlists and to their own streaming platforms. But before I did that, I was produced a shit ton of music. I used to be a producer, and then even further beyond that, what got me into electronic music, it's actually pretty funny. So my dad is really the person that probably got me a little hooked on electronic music.
Shout out, Pops.
Dude, that fucking guy listened to electronic music back in early 2000s. And so growing up, like I heard it all the time. And what
did he listen to?
Dude, I can't even remember. Like, I'll have to ask him what he would play, because I can't even remember. But like John Digweed and Sasha are like two of his favorite fucking artists. Like my mom and him just flew out to Colorado like last year or something for like an overnight trip to go see Sasha and Digweed play a set, and they just fucking partied at awesome. I think it was in Denver or something for like all fucking night. And like him and my mom flew out a couple of years ago. We went and saw I'm blanking on who we went and saw, but I mean we went to Kingdom in Austin. This is like 2018 before Kingdom shut down, and he stayed at that fucking club till like, I shit you not, 5 a.m. Just like dude, he's fucking 56, 57, and he just goes to fucking like techno legit like techno deep house fucking raves till all through the night. So I grew up with that shit.
Life goals.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For real. It totally was. So funny enough, like my family and I used to make fun of him for listening to it, and then like probably 6 years later, it's like it became my life. So I really started like the most distinct memories I have growing up listening to electronic music was listening to LCD Sound System, which they're more rock, but they have a lot of electronic infusion. So like Tribulations, I remember getting hooked on that song from their self-titled album back in like 2005, 2006. But then I remember hearing the Crookers remix of Day and Night, like around 2008 or something, 2009. And that's when my world really started to open up, where I was like, that's a sick track. Okay, I think I see why my dad likes this shit. And then Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites came out, and I was in high school at that time. And so it was like, oh my God, I had no fucking idea this was a thing. Yeah. So then I started to get into kind of the dubstep scene. And then shortly after that, I was talking to an old friend, and he's like, oh, have you ever heard of W&W or Hardwell? And this is like peak, like probably around 2011. So this was when W&W was still doing trance. They had just come out with their Impact album, and he sent me their track Arena, which if there's any trance heads listening to this, you'll fucking know Arena is a classic fucking tune. So after I heard that, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this was a fucking thing. Holy shit. And then he introduced me like Hardwell Spaceman. Then shortly after that, Hardwell and Tiesto came out with 076. And so that just really blew up my entire world around then, where I was like, oh my God, this is fucking crazy. And
I'm glad you reminded me of that, because there actually was like a golden era of like before Big Room was like a main thing. It was like trance that was just done like in a harder electro styling, right? And all that shit was fire. And then and then everyone that liked that kind of filtered into like what we would call Big Room now, and that was cool. And then it got cheesy, and then you look back and you're like, fuck Big Room, I never liked that. And then you're like, but wait, there actually was some good records in there, like a lot.
We all loved it.
We all did. We for sure all did.
No, you're 100% right. You hit it. You nailed it right there.
I'd be a human being that didn't dance to Animals in 2013. Like,
for sure, man. Dude. Animals came out and it was like, nothing can get better than this. Yeah. And then it was probably no more than 2 years later where you're like, nothing can stoop that low. It was like it was a complete 180 where it was like, wait, why do we like this? It's so funny. Yeah, I listen to sometimes Animals comes on randomly where I'm out. I'm like, this is for that time it was cool, but like now it's just cheesy. But
I still want to drop it. I'm gonna go download it tomorrow and drop it next week.
You gotta make a modernize it, remix that shit, make it into a fucking banger.
To be fair, I think the thing with that track was it was one of those tunes where once it comes out, everybody tries to do that thing. And then everybody was doing the kick drum with the percussive reverb thing. And then it's like you have 500 different animals and it gets old real quick.
Yeah, definitely.
It filled up Noah's whole arc.
Yeah.
Every song.
But after that, so like once that scene started hitting, I started to figure, I was like, okay, this is my path. This is where I want to go into. And you know, I grew up going to Warped Tour. Like, I mean, before I was 16, I think I had hit over probably 50 to 60 concerts I had gone to. Damn. So like I would go to concert, and I was super into like alternative rock. So The Maine, Forever the Sickest Kids, Of Mice and Men, just like all, like anyone in Warped Tour around 2008, 2009. I fucking loved it all. So like,
dude, Restoring Forces from Of Mice and Men is still like legitimately like one of my top 5 albums of all time.
Fucking incredible. So The Flood is like, Flood is probably in my top 5 favorite albums of all time. I can go back to that album anytime and just, oh my God. When I first moved to Austin, I think I listened to that album on repeat while I was driving around, just nonstop. But, so like growing up, I would go to concerts all the time, super into music. And I always knew I wanted to do something in the music industry, but I didn't know what it was. I was thinking about going to Full Sail before I knew what Full Sail really was about. And that's kind of bullshit. And so once I found electronic music, I was like, fuck, I can get into this. And so that sparked a love for DJing. One of my buddies at the time was getting into electronic music as well. Saw him make some posts on Facebook. This is probably like 2010, 2011. And so we started hooking up together and DJing, and he had this tiny controller. And this is, I can't remember what it's like a DJ Hercules something. I can't even remember. It was the smallest fucking controller you could possibly imagine. Just 2 little decks with 2 tiny jog wheels. They're like the size of those GameCube discs, like just so small. I mean, this is a tiny controller. So we download like Virtual DJ and would just fuck around making mashups. And after a couple of years, we upgraded our gear, got much better DJ equipment, started DJing around town, and started linking up with other DJs. This was in Boise, Idaho, by the way, which is where I'm from. And so
we got some friends of the podcast out there.
Yeah. There's some pretty there's some decent fucking producers. Kai Wachi came out of Boise, which I used to be friends with him. And then you get so big at some point where it's like you don't even keep track of who, you know, you just stop talking. And I probably even shouldn't say fucking friends. We hung out a couple of times and we talked online a bunch. So I don't even know if I would say we were friends.
For the purposes of this conversation,
we were friendly. Let me say we were friendly. But and then Morgan Madison, who's like blowing up with Mousetrap right now, touring with Deadmau5. He's at Boise as well. But so yeah, we started linking up with other DJs, getting better gear, and then I started to be like, okay, DJing's like, it's cool, but what's the next step? Like, I was doing mashups and shit. I was like, this isn't what, you know, the biggest producers biggest DJs are doing. Like, how the fuck do you write music? And so I found out what Logic 9 was, cracked a version of Logic 9 like most producers do when they first find out how to write music.
Allegedly.
The extended free trial.
Extended free trial.
I'm gonna buy it. I just need to make sure it works.
Yeah. I want to see if I like this. I'm gonna demo it real quick. I'll delete it right away.
Quick.
But so I got into Logic 9 and started fucking around. That was just mind blowing. This was probably around 2012, 2013, and then Logic X came out. Got like deep into Logic X, and then eventually switched over to Cubase and found like a local group of producers in Boise that would meet up for lunches every week. And so I started getting like deeper in the scene with bigger people there, ended up kind of being taken under the wing of some big producers in Boise where they just kind of, they showed me the ropes. They got me addicted to Cubase. They had a beautiful studio. And so I would go there, write with them and hang out with them. They ended up moving to Austin in 2015, and they got me to come visit them. Fell in love with the city and decided to move here in 2016. And it was around that time where I was like, I was getting really, really fucking invested. And my parents, God bless my parents, they're fantastic people. They have done nothing but support the hell out of me. They've like, I agree. They sent my sister to college. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to go, full stop into music. And so, so they supplied that dream. Like they helped me get whatever I needed to make me better and help me out as much as possible. I'm saying this, I don't have crazy gear or anything because I never I was like, don't buy me, I don't need crazy gear. It's worthless. But they really helped me out a lot to kind of pursue that dream and that passion. And I pursued it a little too hard. And I think this is a lot of producers are going to relate to this where, there's this idea in the industry, and I think it's slowly fading away, but it was much more prevalent probably between the years of like 2012 to 2018 or so, where it was like, all you need to do to be a successful and good producer in electronic music is just be in the studio. Just 100%, all you just write tracks. You'll write the one good track and it's going to get signed and you're going to blow up. And like, that's all you need to do. So just be in the studio 24/7. And I had this mindset stuck in my head and it became a very unhealthy habit because it drew me into like, all right, in the studio 7 days a week, got to be in there for like 3 or 4 hours, write a track every single session. And so when I went in with those expectations and that creativity didn't come out, it caused a lot of impostor syndrome issues. It caused a lot of frustration, caused a lot of anger in myself. And these were all expectations that I set on myself. And I think a lot of producers can relate with this. You set these crazy high expectations that aren't real. No one's expecting you to be the best. No one's expecting you to write something right away and be as creative as possible. But I set these expectations on myself and it drove me fucking mad. After I moved to Austin. So I started seeing a therapist to kind of figure out like what's going on. And, I was just too hard on myself. Like I felt like I wasn't living up to these expectations. And I turned this like love for creating art and music into something that started to feel like a job that I didn't want to go to. Especially when I would go in the studio and I just wasn't creating the quality that I wanted. And it sucked. I started resenting going into the studio, which is a terrible position to be in.
Oh, yes.
And I tie it back to this mentality of it's like, just write music, right? You're going to get better and but if you're going in with a bad mindset, if you're frustrated, it doesn't get better. You force that creativity out. You can hear the forcefulness in the music, which is usually what you hear from producers that are younger than like 3 years or so. Like you could hear that forced creativity a lot of times, which sometimes you got to work that out. Like you do have to work that out at some point. And once you hit that 5-year mark, you start getting that stride,
Yeah.
So
one of our guys in the chat, Blunter S. Wampson, says you're trying for the perpetual banger shitter, but it's pure expectation constipation.
Yes, that is so true. I mean, it's spot on. It's spot on. So, so I started going to therapy, talking about it, and I realized, I think I need to like step away a little bit. I need to, let off the gas and take time, like accept that it's okay if I'm not in the studio. Because I did get to a point where it was like, if I'm not in the studio, I'm wasting time. If I'm not writing music and writing good music, I'm wasting all of my fucking time right now. And so that's what like perpetuated this terrible mindset that just sent me down a deep, dark hole. And so it was around 2018 that actually it was like January of 2018 where I found the Producer Dojo.
Me too.
Yeah, went to the webinar that Dylan was hosting. Found the pink noise mixing, which blew my fucking mind. So I'm gonna get into that right now, but. When I found that, I was like, sweet. I found the weekly download fucking incredible. I mean, the amount of knowledge in that is just amazing. So like that taught me a lot. And, you know, at the time my mixing was terrible. It was so bad. Like I could write a track. I could get the songwriting down. I could get the creative process out. But when it got to the mixing, it was like, I heard the song so many times. I worked on it for tens of hours and now I have to mix it, but I didn't know where I wanted to go because I fucked with it so much and it was just so exhausting. And so I didn't have a good way of mixing. And that's when I found the pink noise mixing, which changed everything. But at the same time, I was talking to my therapist and was thinking, I think I need to step off a little and like relax and give myself some time to just do other shit and be okay with that. So I stopped producing. And I was like, when the itch comes, I'll go in the studio and write. Like I get those, whenever I get like those sparks of like, I need to be in the studio. I don't know why, but I need to go write. I write the best shit I've ever fucking written. I just let the creativity eventually come, which has worked really well for me. But when I decided to step off the gas, I didn't want to just completely alienate myself outside of the scene. And so I decided, you know what, let me start getting into mixing. Let me help out other producers. So I just made a post in like, it was probably in like May of 2018. I made a post in r/EDM production and was like, hey, you know, I work really well working on other people's tracks. That helps me get my creativity out. And I'd like to do some lessons and teach some people how to mix. Cause at this time, after going through, you know, the Producer Dojo and doing a bunch more mixing, I was much more confident in my mixes. It was just on a next level. So I was like, let me try helping out other people. So 5 people reached out to me and they took me up on the offer and I did 5 lessons with these producers. And that's when shit got crazy, where I like all of these concepts started just being retained like crazy when I started teaching them. Which I cannot suggest this enough for any producer. Like if you're struggling in a specific area, whether it's like sound design, maybe even mixing or songwriting, but like, you know more than the average person, go teach it to a beginner. Because when you go teach something like that, you retain when you have to explain it to someone that doesn't know what you're talking about, you start to see the nuance in the little things of like, that's how I got really good at explaining what a compressor was and how I figured out really how a compressor works. And what it does was like producers would be like, well, what the hell is a compressor? And I was like, well, let me try to explain this. And then I started coming up with analogies and I was like, oh my God, I actually fucking know what this is. And I didn't feel like I knew what it was before. So I started teaching producers how to mix, and my mixing got there. I took their tracks from like a shitty track to actually sounding pretty decent. And that's when I realized, fuck, I could actually do something with this. I really like this. I like helping out other producers. I like seeing how happy they are getting the result they wanted that they weren't getting before. And so that's when, like around June, I realized, fuck, you know what I could do? I could just start a mixing and mastering studio, still work in the industry, help out other producers, which is really fulfilling, make that into a career. And then I can supplement all of the money that I need for like a music career or producing into that. And so that's why I started Envious Audio, which is my mixing and mastering business. And here I am 4 years later. A year after that, like 2019 is when I started my podcast called Electronic Dance Money, which is it's a pure business resource for EDM producers. It's specific for EDM producers. Teaches you all of the things that aren't really taught to you, right? Everyone learns how to produce, how to songwrite, how to mix, how to sound design, but there aren't a ton of people. There's very few people that are teaching the business side to like production, making a business out of your music. And so like building my own studio with the knowledge that I had and all these books that I was reading, I decided to start my podcast to talk about that stuff, because there's a ton of other podcasts out there that are already interviewing producers, but there weren't a lot out there teaching the music or the business side of the music industry.
Amen.
And
that's true.
Yeah. And so I kind of set it off to be that, to just do that. And I think I just hit like 23,000 downloads. It's been out for like 4. Thank you. I'm very happy with that number because I've done like no real marketing. Almost all of it's word of mouth. And so it's gotten to a point where like my buddy just sent me a message today with a screenshot that some dude in his Discord shared my podcast. I was like, fuck, that's crazy. Like it's actually being spread by word of mouth now. Yeah. Which is a lot of fun. So, and I had no audience, before I started it. So just doing consistent releases like every 2 weeks. But that was the thing that was missing that I didn't realize until I stopped producing. I started working in the business, on the business side of music, was this is the thing that's lacking for producers. A lot of them are stuck in this phase of like, just write music, but there's a whole other side of the industry that's arguably more than half of what you should be doing, which is building an email list, learning how to run ads to promote your music, learning how to network and connect with other people and just market in general, what that looks like, content creation. There's this huge side of the industry that's just not a lot of people are teaching, not a lot of producers know about, and a lot of them think that they just need to be in the studio, which is not the case. Like those days where you're not feeling creative, don't be creative. Marketing can be creative, but go build a fucking website that people can go to, and you can start building an email list and sending out free downloads to your email. Like build an audience. That's really what it's all about, and how you get to that place of, what do record labels look at? What do festivals look at? What do bookers look at? Do you have an audience? Are you going to sell tickets? Like that's what they give a shit about. So if you're not building an audience and you're just thinking that, if you build it, they will come, aka if you just produce music, people will come, that's just not the case anymore. Maybe it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? It started off, you could just DJ. Then it started off, you can DJ and produce. Now it's kind of like you have to DJ, produce, and then do something else to supplement and to make it bigger. So that's kind of what the whole podcast has been about. The idea of it. It's like teaching the shit that producers should be working on that they either don't know about or are ignoring.
Yeah. Comprehensive. Amen. I like it. I wouldn't really call that a rant because it had like a very consistent arc. I like it though. Good. First thing off the top of my head, like being so involved in the, helping newer producers or any producer get better at the business side of things. What are some common pitfalls that you see people get into when they're, just starting to try and market themselves or build an audience or anything in that vein?
The biggest thing I think that a lot of producers get sucked into bad analytics. And what I mean by bad analytics is like, how many streams do I have on my new track that was just released last week? Right. They go back to their track on Spotify and they refresh, like looking, does it show, did the less than 1,000 symbol go away and it's now more? And they get, hang on one second, I gotta turn this off. They get wrapped up into those streams, which I don't necessarily think is the right mindset to go into things. I don't necessarily think that streams are what's going to get you the fan base that you want. Nor is it going to really make you the money that you probably want to make as a musician.
Oh, we know that part.
Yeah,
true.
So
you're getting $1 billion a week. Yeah, you might be able to make that living.
Yeah, if you're Calvin Harris with crazy, you'll make good money. But no, I think and this has kind of been dawned on me just as of recent. In my last podcast I did with a buddy of mine who actually was one of those first 5 people that hit me up for a free lesson. He's like my best friend now to this day.
That's dope.
Oh, that's lit.
Yeah. And I had him on the podcast last week to talk about 1001 track lists.
Oh, dude, I just listened to that today. Dope episode.
It is. So he wrote an article. He started off writing an article for my website about a month ago or so. And I was like, sweet. And he interviewed one of the lead marketing people over at 1001 track list. So there's some good snippets in there. But I brought him on the podcast to go like fully fledged into what 1001 track list is, because I still was kind of hazy on what the whole point was. And after that episode, it started to dawn on me how much more important I feel like support is rather than those streams, because the support is what's going to get you a lot of the goals that that producers want, right? Most producers want to release on the biggest labels, and they want support from the biggest artists. They want respect, right? You want respect out of the industry, especially from those people that have made it. So like focusing, I feel like focusing your marketing efforts on how to get that support is going to get you way more than, 50,000 streams will get you, because there's no guarantee that those 50,000 streams are 50,000 fans that are going to return again. But if you're being supported by your favorite artists and you're being supported more and more, that's going to get you a lot more doors opened up to the label that producer might own. If they're supporting you, they probably are interested in releasing you. And if they're interested in releasing you, they're probably pretty interested in collaborating with you. And if they're interested in collaborating with you, they may even be interested in taking you on tour with them. So like there's this buildup that if you work towards these, like this support that you can get, especially using 1001 track list, that I think can get a lot more for producers than just focusing on general streams, which is what a lot of producers do. That, and I mean, aside from that, like building a promo plan too is what a lot of producers don't do, and they're terrible at creating. So it's like focusing on streams and not building a promo plan at the same time. First of all, not creating a promo plan is not going to get you the streams that you want. So it's like you're fucking yourself there when you don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that this support topic is a juicy nugget for us. It's not something that I don't think ever really talked about on this podcast, like how to get it, where to go, like what to do. I would love to jump in at the ground floor of that topic. Yeah.
So since we recorded the podcast, I've been thinking about this, because like, how do you, I've been thinking about like creating some sort of guide or something to this, because I think there's a pretty easy science to the support thing. The biggest thing I can think of that I've been like going over in my head of like, how do you get support would be, obviously when you're writing a track, most people have reference tracks. And I think if you have a really well-written track, and either you're lacking in the mixing, you need to hire someone to get a really good mix, or your mix is fucking incredible. And you're just getting really good okays from people, getting some feedback, but like you refine something that's just, it fits a label. Like, it should be signed to a bigger label. I think taking whatever reference track you're using, looking that up on 1001 track list and seeing where it's being supported. So you see the radio shows that it's being supported on, you look at the playlist that it's being supported on, and that's kind of your standing point. So with that in mind, you can take that and start submitting it to the same playlists. So you can potentially get playlisted when the track is released, but then also start submitting it to those same radio shows that are supporting that track. Now, your reference track doesn't need to be by someone, huge, incredibly big, that's so far out of your reach that you might not be able to get on the same radio shows. But I think the best place to look is like smaller-ish artists that don't have a big following, that are being played on some bigger radio shows. And if your reference track is similar to that one, or is that track that was played on a big radio show, start submitting to those radio shows. I think that's the best way that you're going to start getting supported on radio shows. And the second you start getting supported on those radio shows, that artist might start playing your track out at venues, and other artists are going to hear that they're playing with and will want that track and might start playing it out, might play it on their radio show because they heard it on someone else's. And those fans, which you probably want their fans to be your fans, those fans are going to become fans of you. I mean, I remember there was a Hardwell on Air episode from like 2012 or something. I can't remember the artist's name, but I remember hearing a track on there, and like there's been a number of times where I've heard tracks on radio shows where I'm like, I fucking like that, and I look up the artist and I start following them and I become a fan of them. So it's like those support slots are what are gonna, or those support tracks or support radio shows, support artists that are supporting you. Those are what's going to get you the fans that you want. And then you're going to be recognized by the artists that you want. So that's what like 1001 Tracklist is just the perfect tool for maximizing a marketing plan or a promo plan of, you know, how do I get on this radio show? What's the best way to go about it? Which is, I think, you know, finding that reference track and piecing it together, finding radio shows.
So in addition to like being able to find out what, like, okay, this is my reference track that I you know, wrote this song kind of near and checked out when I was mixing, and I can go see where this was supported. Once you start getting support, 1001 track list also comes in useful. I learned today because it shows you who's giving you support, and then that gives you some credibility. You can use that in your promo. You can maybe reach out like, oh, they have this label. Let me start sending them submissions.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's like 1001 Tracklist is probably one of the most underutilized websites that producers should be using. Same with SongStats. By the way, if no one knows what fucking SongStats is right now, anyone listening to this, go download SongStats on your fucking phone right now and pay for, it's like $9 a month or something. Just pay for 1 month and enter in all of your information, which I think it connects your Spotify, and you'll immediately get a touch notification if you've been supported by other artists. It'll let you know who you were supported by. My buddy Mike, who I had on the podcast where we talked about 1001 Tracklist last week, he was telling me his buddy download SongStats literally like the day before we recorded this episode, and it turns out he was supported by Tiesto back in like October. He had no idea though. So like, yeah, like you could download SongStats right now and you might have been supported by someone 6 months ago and you had no idea. And like, that's just more content for you to promote and put out on Instagram or TikTok or whatever that can get you more clout. It can attract the fans of that person, but then you can also put that in EPK. You can put that in your bio and it gives you some credibility.
Yeah, that clout is important. And like, the source of who's telling somebody about your music is really important. And it seems like the further away it gets from you, the more credible it feels. Like if I'm like, my music's dope, you know, people are going to be like, everybody says that shit. But if like Rip Kenny's like, yo, Luke Rain's music is dope, people are like, oh, somebody else is talking about that. But then if, you know, Tiesto's like, yo, I'm playing Luke Rain's music in my set, we were like, I don't know who the fuck that is, but I know who Tiesto is, so this guy must be super legit.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. That is like that's the whole point of getting this support, is like focusing on that support is going to open up way more doors than just 100,000 streams. 100,000 streams are great, yeah, they're awesome in the moment, but like that goes away. It doesn't always stick around. But that support can actually lead to more support and more support. And it just like, it quantifies and keeps doubling every single time you get more support. So it's like, that's where I think like a lot of that focus should be on, is submitting to radio shows, having a promo list, like having a promo list, a personal promo list for your own releases. So fucking important. Start building up, you know, a spreadsheet full of radio shows that you want to be supported by in their demo emails, and then just other producers, if they have a demo email, just build up a lengthy fucking list and add them to a MailChimp account, which technically, you know, you might not be, they technically didn't subscribe to it, but if you just start mass emailing people on Gmail, that's not good either. You can get reported as spam and that doesn't help. But what I usually like to do, one of the outlines I gave a buddy was like, if you want to be supported on a radio show or email someone, just let them know, ask them if you can add them to their to a promo list. And more times than not, they'll say, okay, especially if they like the track, but they don't, you know, they might not put that track on the radio show right away, but they'll let you know they like it and they want more from you. So, having your own personal promo list like that is wildly important when you have new releases, because that's how you're going to get supported.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think a lot of people think about fan email lists, but don't think about like promo email lists to other outlets.
Yeah, definitely. Even the fan email list. Like, here's the thing that a lot of producers don't realize too, is that you know, you can start monetizing what you know now just off of an email list of other EDM producers or electronic producers, because every electronic producer is a fan of electronic music. So either giving away some sort of free content that of knowledge that to other producers and getting them on an email list, that already can help you. One, you can get supported by other actual producers and DJs, but then two, you could possibly sell them other products later on and actually start monetizing what you know. So like kind of combining the two of fans and other producers can get you the best of both worlds, where you can get the support, you can possibly monetize those people, but then also providing value to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question I want to bring it back to. A little earlier we were talking, and I felt very called out, to be honest, when you were talking about managing the imposter syndrome and feeling like you got to drill in the hours and blah, blah, blah. That part really spoke to me, and I want to, at least for a little bit, talk to the people that maybe maybe are a little earlier on in their music journey, maybe aren't thinking about monetizing and that kind of stuff quite yet. I'd love to hear your perspective on like how to go about properly learning and getting better at your skill. I know you mentioned teaching other people, but for people that maybe don't feel like they have as much to offer and they're still like really in that beginner exponential growth kind of phase, when do you suggest people just force it out and keep working on the technicals and keep trying to get it out versus and maybe you had a sign or something or a kind of moment where you're like, all right, I now feel like having more information won't help me more than addressing this. You want to talk a little bit about those two?
Yeah. So there's definitely a curve. There is like a curve of most where like you need a lot of information and you do need to be in the studio constantly. And I'd say that's usually around like the first year or two. Like the first year or two is you're really like a toddler, just like a sponge, consuming as much as you need to know, learning what plugins are, learning what a reverb is, learning what, you're learning all these new things that you probably have never heard of. So you do need to be playing with those and you do need to be working in the studio. I won't say that you should never not be constantly in the studio, because there is a point where you should be, and that is when you're first starting. But usually around, depending on your progression, and this is where I think a mentor is extremely important. Like mentors are, it's close to the number one thing that you should look for is a mentor that is probably 3 to 5 years ahead of you. You don't want a mentor that's 10 years ahead of you. Sometimes you can get that, but most of the time those people are, their skill level is far beyond yours, and there's just not, you might not get what you need out of that. Same with the other person. So getting a mentor, they can help guide you to be a reference point of when it's like, okay, you're starting to write really good stuff. You can start shifting your focus on other things. Another key factor is having your first official release that's like a good track. And that one can be a little tougher to gauge, which is again where I think the mentor comes into place, because a mentor can kind of, if they're a good mentor, they can tell you what a good label looks like. Most labels are not all that good. Most labels are glorified distributors, and they don't have a fucking marketing plan, and they will release anything. And if they release anything, they basically release nothing, and no one gives a shit. So when you find a label, like a good label I can point to is like, if you can get a release out on Digital Empire Records, which in my opinion, Digital Empire is a solid label where they don't crowd releases and stack releases where, they have 3 tracks released every single day. So no one release is getting the spotlight that they need. But they do also have somewhat of a marketing plan and do promote their artists and do tend to get their artists playlisted. So like, that's a good label. They do what they need to do, and they take a percentage for a reason, because they're recouping their investment on you. But if you're a producer that's been producing for 2 years and you get your first record label release, but it's on just any willy-nilly record label, I don't think that's a good gauge of like, okay, you're ready to start shifting focus on building an audience. So I think that first decent record label release that doesn't just release everything, that's a good indicator of like, okay, it's time to start shifting focus on building an audience. Having a mentor that can guide you in that and that can tell you, hey, I think it's time to start creating content and building an audience will help. Mindset wise, when you start seeing some of those frustration issues, I think, where you're like, I've watched 30 fucking tutorials and I feel like I haven't progressed at all. That's a good indicator, right? If you keep watching stuff, but you feel like you're not learning anything, that's a good indicator of you might need to shift focus somewhere else, or you might need to stop looking at fucking tutorials. You've learned enough. You just need to work some more stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to talk more about that idea of you've learned enough, now go out and do it. Especially being in the content creation world where it can always feel like more. Do you feel like you've hit a point where you've learned enough and now you can go out and explore your style? And if so, what was kind of like the first step into not having to rely on tutorials as much?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because I feel like when you asked this question, I was thinking to myself, like, at what point did that happen to me? And I swear to God, like, I have no idea. There was just one day where I just like stopped instinctively watching tutorials with all my free time and just like spent that time actually sound designing myself or whatever it is. I feel like there's just, at least, and I don't want to take the wind out of this question, but I feel like it just kind of happens. Like you just kind of end up like realizing like, oh, I'm just going to do the thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think you're totally right. It's a natural progression. Here's the thing. There's no fucking rule book to music. There's no guide. There's guides out there, but there's no guide to a music career of like, all you have to do is work in the studio for 2 hours a day. And in 3 years, you're going to be here. There's no fucking guarantee of that. And anyone that tells you is full of shit. Usually the idea is like after 10 years, and if you've consistently done it for 10 years, you start seeing success around that stage. But there is this natural progression within the first probably 3 to 5 years where it is like, I don't know what it is, because you're totally right. I felt like I hit a point around the 3-year mark where I was like, I don't need to watch any more serum tutorials. Like I don't need to watch any more track walkthroughs. I get like most of that comes with time and progress, like the crazy shit you hear in tracks where you're like, how the fuck did they do that? That's 15 years of work that they finally got to that point where they just naturally know how to do things. So
and also that those things that you're like, how the fuck did they do that? Like you ask them, they're like, how the fuck did I do that? Like most of the time it's just, the shit you're using well enough to stumble into stuff that surprises you at how cool it is. Like you know how to use the stuff and then you fuck with it enough times and then you're like, wow, that's cool. And like you had the taste all along, right? So you could still pick the best bits. You're just getting better at getting to that stuff quicker.
Yeah. You really do just stumble into it. And that happens. I mean, the best shit that I've written was like, wait, why did I just flipped to the wrong sound. And I was like, oh my God, that fucking works. Holy shit. Okay. I know where to go. And then it's like an hour later, the track's done. And that does happen. You stumble into it. That I think that's a pretty good indicator too of where when you stop watching those tutorials is as you start stumbling into stuff, because at first it's forced. It's like very depending on what you're writing, everything's robotic. Everything's like right on the beat and just it's very robotic and it doesn't flow. It doesn't have a natural cadence. But you work that out over time. And I think tutorials do help. But once you start getting that natural flow of things, once you start writing music a little bit faster and finishing more tracks and start bumping into those happy accidents and you're like, holy fuck, that's crazy. that I think is where that transition phase starts coming, because it helps your confidence, right? You get more confident. You're like, fuck, I didn't know I could do that. Let me try doing it again. And then it happens again and you're like, holy shit, I think I might be getting the hang of this. And it just starts building up. It's like a snowball, right? It's a tiny snowball at the top of the hill. By the time you get a quarter way down the hill, it's a pretty fucking big snowball. And it starts turning into a boulder, and it just picks up after that.
You know, I really like that answer of happy accidents. And the reason I asked this is through teaching so many sessions. You know, I've been somewhat able to help people overcome this, but I feel like certain students, and myself included, will go through this phase where they really struggle to just take that next step of not having to rely on tutorials. And yeah, I know it's kind of on the spot question, but like, for example, I remember one thing that really solidified this for me, and there was a bunch of kind of little passing moments that maybe it would take me a bit to recall, but watching Dylan work on a song on YouTube Live for 2 weeks and seeing that, like, oh, you can just give a song love and keep giving it attention and focus, and it will shape up, and you don't have to stop like, oh, I need a turnaround sound. Let me look at Rocket Power Sounds growl tutorial and see how to do this shit.
Dude, you hit on something that I've really started to learn over the last couple of years, and I learned it from my buddy Noah Neiman, and he goes by Dr. Neiman now. Dude's fucking incredible. If you guys want to know of an insane dubstep producer, look up Dr. Neiman. He just released on Disciple, and he's released a bunch on Circus. But
damn good shit.
I was gonna say, I remember hearing him on what podcast was it? Like the EDM Prodcast.
EDM Prodcast. Like, yeah, he's been on there a couple times. I just had him on. We talked about rebranding.
Hell yeah.
I keep telling him he's got to cut me a royalty check because I came up with his name, because he's an actual doctor.
I remember that. Yeah, like that stuck out in my mind because he's like an optometrist.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, he's like you don't, the patient canceled. I'm gonna work on music for an hour.
Dude, it's so crazy. Funny. You have no idea how many tracks he finishes a track a day in like a couple of hours. It's fucking bananas. And he's a doctor, and he has a family. Like, the dude is an animal. He's been working in the industry for like 20 years, but we used to work out together like every fucking day. And that's when he started, right around 2019, was thinking about rebranding. And that's when he started switching to dubstep. But he's the one that got this idea in my head that you're talking about, Tesco, which is, when you have an idea, and a lot of producers start out this way, they get an 8-bar loop. Maybe they extend that out to 16 bars and they start fucking with it. They start deleting stuff, rearranging and just toying around. But they're like, I'm not feeling it. You know, maybe you're 2 hours in and you're just not feeling it. That's okay. Step away. But I think what's very important is to not step away forever. Come back, and like, ideas need work. They need to be massaged. You have to massage the idea out. And sometimes that takes going through 30 different sounds and tweaking the melody a little bit. There's obviously a stopping point, because there's a point where you get where it's like, okay, this needs to be scrapped. If you haven't made progress on anything in over like 3 or 4 days, go on to something else, right? But usually by that like hour 5 mark or so is when the idea starts to get massaged out and you figure out where you need to go. But if you don't stick with that and you just create these 8-bar loops constantly and you're like, I'm not feeling it, that's not good. You only spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, and go on to the next thing. I'm not feeling it. Like, you're never going to progress. You're never going to massage that idea out and figure out that creative process that you need to figure out. But like, sticking with an idea and just working it, and you know, sometimes it's like a fucking a deep tissue massage where you gotta go in deep and like just,
it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's gonna suck a lot of time. Yeah,
it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it's gonna suck a little, but eventually you stumble. That's where you find the stumble. The more you massage that idea out, again, don't go past a point of no return where it's like you have diminishing results. You don't want to. That takes some time to figure out where that point is. But yeah, you gotta sometimes you gotta work it out, and that's where you stumble into those mistakes and go, holy fuck, I didn't know I could do that. And then within an hour, the track's done.
Yeah. I think that's I like another key part of this too is like, I'm sure some people are like, well, what if the idea is not that good and it's not worth finishing? Like, come on, dude, you know, like you have a producer intuition, like the one that needs to get finished, the one that needs to be massaged, you know, the one that you wrote the first time or stumbled into and your palms got sweaty. You're like, oh, that's good. And then like, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh, but it's not perfect. And it was so good like 30 minutes ago. Like, no, you had that tingly sensation. That thing needs to get finished.
Yeah. And that's where I got, when I started stepping away, and I still don't produce nearly as much as I used to. A lot of my focus is on the marketing side of stuff and building my business right now. But that itch comes, dude. I have those itches. It's probably once a month or so. I get that itch where it's like, fuck, I just need to write something. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's just this intuition of like, I just need to be in a fucking DAW and just start writing. And that's when the ideas fucking flow. Like, that's when I get into a flow state. Within 5 hours, the track is done. And it's the best thing I've ever written. So I've learned to lean into that and not worry. And again, because I'm not trying to build a crazy music career right now. So I'm not interested in constantly being in the studio. But for those of you who might be in the same situation, or, you go into a session, you keep coming back and you're just not, you're not feeling it. It is okay to step away sometimes. Like that, the one thing that I think a lot of producers need to hear, especially with you, like people who are like you and I, Tesco, where it's like, we have this imposter syndrome and this idea that we just need to fucking grind. That can be very unhealthy and it can lead to dark places. And, it can lead you not liking what you're doing, which sucks. Not liking producing is a shitty place to be. I know some really fucking big producers in the industry that did some like rebranding genre changes and have been stuck in that genre for quite a while now. And they don't really enjoy writing that. They don't enjoy going into the studio. And that's a shitty place to be as well. So yeah. And they're fucking, I mean, they have families that rely on the paychecks that they get for playing crazy fucking shows, and they don't like what they're doing anymore. And so that's a rough place to be.
They hate living the dream.
Yeah.
I think something to consider too is it's not this binary of either I'm working on music or I'm not. There's so many things to work on in music. Like if you get burnt out in the studio, what about if you focus on DJing? Or like you did, like, I'm not really in a place where I need to write all the time and don't feel it. So I'm going to focus on engineering because that's bringing me more joy and more money. And then when you choose to roll back to, if you choose to like, I'm going to really pour it into creativity, think about how much better of an engineer you are now because of all this practice you've been giving yourself.
Dude, well, which is funny because I am in a place right now where it's like my fucking mixing and mastering is top notch, but I have let the songwriting and production be at the wayside. So it's like, it's tougher to get creative ideas out right now. But when I have that creative idea, the mixing and mastering is just, it's spot on. It's right where it needs to be. But yeah, like stepping back, my point is like, as producers, you have to let yourself, and maybe you need someone to tell you, and I'll be that person. It's okay to take a fucking step back. And if you want to explore something else where within the industry, like I did with mixing or whatever, that's going to help you out. It's not like it's a waste of time. You're going to learn a skill from it. And everything you did in the past isn't a waste of time if you switch it up as well. Again, like if I decide, I don't want to do mixing and mastering anymore, that's okay. I can go, that skill that I learned, all the business shit that I've learned just from starting the studio is probably worth close to a degree. And so none of it was a waste of time if I decide to switch somewhere else, which was my whole plan. It's like, do mixing and mastering, make money off of that, supplement a music career and start trying that again.
Yeah. I think like on a macro level, like this discussion is really important, like to like focus in on the fact that like, as a producer, you get stuck in these like really dogmatic thought loops. Like the track only should get finished if it was a masterpiece after X amount of hours. And like that first drop isn't right. and I've spent that amount of time on it, well, I guess it's not going to happen. Or like, I need to, like, normally I finish a song after this much time or whatever it is. Like you have to come to terms with the fact that just like not one career in music is the same. They're all wildly unique. Like every process is and can be wildly unique. And you need to like trust the intuition of what actually needs to get finished to be like, okay, this one actually is going to take 200 hours.
Yeah.
And that fucking sucks. But you know what? Like, it's going to get done. I was, for the longest time, I was in that camp where like, if the song didn't come out and I'm not happy with it, with like at this point, like it's just not going to get done. And for the album I'm writing right now, like I literally had to rewrite an entire drop. Like not a single thing is the same except maybe the kick and snare. And I thought like, oh, I was like, oh my God, you're going to ruin this shit. Like, you know, you can't do this. You know, you can't do this. Why are you wasting your time? Don't do it. And I did it and it's better.
Yeah.
Like objectively now it is better. And I knew that it needed to happen. And it took twice as long to write another drop for it because it's like, you've heard the song with the first drop so many times, you fall into these thought loops, but you have to remember that like, it's not the dogmatic thing that you for the longest time just thought it had to be like this. Like you can do it any certain way. It's you just have to have the confidence that you can get there. It might take a little bit more time, but the ones that need it, do it. Cause you know, in the back of your head, what needs to get done.
Yeah, man. I think too within music, and there was a funny ass T-Pain rant he did recently on this where he was talking about nobody gives a shit how long it took you to get the song done. And I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely had a point where I would start to feel like because I knew shit, this shit should just come easy, right? And my idea should just be fire right off the bat, right? And this chord progression, I'm going to get this first chord right off the bat, right? Because I know my shit. And all that kind of stuff really started to like create this defeatist attitude where like I would spend 2 hours on an idea, listen to it, and like just fucking hate my life and feel like I was losing it. And it's that idea of like, and I guess it kind of segues into a question. I don't want to get all over the place, but we got Bunny and Christine in the chat asking, what advice do you have for people that never feel like they're ready? And he says, I'm in a perpetual state of making new tracks and never fully polishing stuff off. The list of drafts I need to revisit just keeps getting longer. Man, I feel like that idea of massaging the tracks like you were talking about, I want to hear you talk more about that because I feel like that was such a huge turning point in like viewing my songs like these little trees that I need to shower with love and care, and I need to give them water every day, and I can't just dump 10 liters of water on it today and it's going to be a tree tomorrow.
You gotta water.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your advice for Bunny and Christina here, who are kind of stuck in this same place of just having all these drafts. What do you suggest they do to take it to the next level?
Okay, so this actually ties perfectly into what the Producer Dojo teaches, and this is where when I started running through the Producer Dojo, I was kind of in the same situation where I was like, I have all these fucking loops, I have all these unfinished tracks, like what the fuck's going on? Systemization is so fucking important for your creative process. You have no fucking idea. The amount of energy you waste when you don't have systems in place and you open up a blank project every single time, and the exhaustion of like going through the same repetitive tasks. So like one, having a template helps out a bunch, but going into the organizational shit of like, are your samples labeled? Are they organized? Do you have new sounds? And so you're not opening up Serum, playing with Serum for an hour and a half, and you're not writing anything. And then you're like, that was a big waste of time. I don't want to do this anymore. And you leave. So having that system in place, and that allows you to get to, and this is what Dylan has talked about for years, it allows you to get to that creativity way faster. You're not thinking about what sample you're using and what key it's in because it's not labeled with the key, and you have to go open up an EQ and look at the frequency and be like, okay, it's in this key. Okay, now I'm writing in this key. Like, or just digging through samples if you've already started on a key. But shorter tracks, Dylan's talked about that, write minute and a half tracks. That's all you need. Like break, build up, drop, outro, done. You can write that very quickly and start that process. But the massaging is also where that plays into even more. Like you can take that idea a step further. You can take the idea of, okay, if you're organized, if you have templates, so every time you open up a project, it's not completely empty. You have Serum where it always is because you always open up Serum. You have your drum racks where they always are because you always open up a drum rack and you have that there. You don't have to think about that and go into that process. So if you have those systems in place and you start with this idea of, okay, let me write some shorter tracks instead of trying to write a 3-minute track for no reason because you have this dogmatic idea and this expectation in your head of yourself. No one expects you to write a 3-minute track. There's no rule saying you have to write a 3-minute track. So write a shorter track. And that's where the massaging can get really interesting, is where you take that loop, extend it out, start deleting stuff, have that 1.5 to 2 minutes of a track, and start processing that a little bit more. Start working on different layerings. How can you make your bass line a little bit interesting? Do you have too many notes going on? Start deleting notes, or maybe even taking a note, pulling that out, and adding a different sound just for that one note to like add a little bit of a turnaround creative sound. And that's how you work that massage out. Is honestly, it's that like, it's almost like you learn to stumble into things. Going back to what we were talking about with, when's that point where you don't need to look at tutorials and you start stumbling into stuff. This is how you figure out how to massage ideas out, and how you figure out how to stumble into things is just be creative. And I know that's kind of vague, but being creative means you take some risks, you fuck around, you delete things, you add new things in, you layer things in weird ways. You play around with different genres that you might not normally play around with. And that's where the ideas really start to get massaged out. And you do end up stumbling into something and you're like, this is the idea. This was the whole point of all of this, is this one thing that I just stumbled into. So if you feel like you have a bunch of unfinished stuff that's not polished, you don't have to go back to those ideas. Sometimes it's not useful to go back to those ideas if they're months and months old, because you might be a different person back then than you are now, and you might not be able to kind of fit into whatever mood you were in when you were writing that, and that's okay. But I think it's very important to start building habits today, to start going, okay, I'm going to start this track, and I'm going to give myself to the end of the week to massage something out. I'll work on it a couple of hours each day. And I'll dedicate myself to just being creative. That doesn't mean play around with sound designing for 2 hours. It's not the point, right? That's not what you're there to do. You're there to massage the idea out. So giving yourself and for me, it's the weekends. That's when I have the most free time. So when I feel like I need to write, I go in on Saturday and I go, okay, I'm going to start writing, and I'd like to try to finish something by Sunday. And usually I can get most of the stuff massaged out by Saturday and finish it by Sunday. If not, then I go, okay, I'm going to put it away, go back to normal life, do my Monday to Friday. And when Saturday comes, I'm going to continue to massage the idea out. That's my process. That's what I found works for me. And I almost always end up with something. Sometimes it's not the best. It doesn't have to be the best. But the point is I worked that muscle of massaging an idea out of like, okay, I don't like that. Maybe that melody doesn't work. Let's try this note. That sound, let's see if we can work with a better sound with that. Maybe I can layer that sound with something else. Or like I was saying, like extract that note out, put a different sound there. Creating different turnaround stuff. Like that's how you massage the idea out, and you stumble into that spark of like, holy fuck, okay, now we've got something.
Yeah. I think important to add on this discussion as well for everyone that, that feels like you're never ready. You never feel like you're ready to to make the track that it needs to be. Like it might be obvious, it might not be, but I'm just going to let you know, no one ever actually feels like they're ready.
Yeah.
It's just true.
We always raise the bar when we get to it.
Exactly. Every single time No. Even your big, like, favorite artist ever feels like that from time to time. The only way you actually know when you're ready is by looking back on the things that you've finished and been like, wow, okay, so that was great and I can improve upon this and this. But I think one thing that I really picked up from what you said is that, like, the way to get there, it, like, to finish the thing, you have to be okay with those periods of time where you're spending hours and you're making 1% progress. And what I would say, for if you have a giant list of drafts that just keeps getting longer, you never finish anything, like, start with the top of that draft list, the one that, like, keeps popping into your head, that one that you know in the back of your mind needs to get finished, the one where, like, the first session you were like, oh my God, like, I'm gonna blow up off this song, the one you had that feeling, that's the one you need to pick. And then in your head realize, I'm gonna work on this, and it's okay that it's going to take for fucking ever, and I'm going to make no progress with a lot of hours, and it sucks because almost every track to finish goes through that period of, like, oh my God, like, I'm antsy, like, why isn't this done yet? What the fuck? This sucks. Like, that happens. And you have to be okay with the fact that, like, you're going to waste some time, but the song needs to get done. So like, you have to, it's tough. And you only get to the point where you realize that that's okay by doing it enough times. But just pick that one that keeps popping up and suffer through it. And then when that's done, you'll be like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are certain tracks, and, like, a great artist to bring up here is Slumberjack. Two dudes out of, I think, New Zealand.
Australia, I think.
It's either Australia or New Zealand. Yeah, I can't remember. But they're fucking incredible. I mean, the music they write is insane. There was a track I remember that I had on my radio show. This is back in the day in, like, 2017 or something. And I remember watching a video about the track, and they talked about how it took them a year to write that. So it happens. Like, there are tracks that quite literally take a year and go through 3 or 4 renditions of different drops before it's like, that's the one, there's the idea. That's okay. You could take a year to write a track, but what's even more important is that you're not spending the entire year just writing that track, right? There's other stuff you're also working on. Yeah. There's other tracks you're working on, but occasionally there might be that track where it's like, I need to go back in and keep massaging that out. And sometimes those tracks that take a year to massage out end up being the biggest fucking ones, where it's, like, huge. Yeah. So yeah, like, definitely you can massage it out for a while, but it is important to also understand you shouldn't just massage that out for a year. Like, that shouldn't be your only focus, is that one thing, because then you're hitting that diminishing return, right? Because if you've been working on one single track and nothing else for 3 fucking months, you have kind of wasted some time.
Yeah. And sure. that brings me to something I like to talk about is, like, if you are having trouble finishing this track, what skills do you need that you don't have? Like, because if you worked on it today and say you already had, say it's songwriting, that's the problem, and you don't go write any other songs, you're not going to become a better songwriter staring at this song that you don't know how to finish. Go write more songs. It was brought up in the chat, something I've told my students, and it's true, that I put a mix and master on every single whip that I have. So I can put it on so I can bounce it and put it on a playlist with all of my other whips and go back and listen to it periodically and be like, I'm over that one, or, ooh, holy shit, I forgot about this one. I got to finish that.
Yeah.
And it gives me that mixing and mastering practice on every single track. Because if what's the problem is you don't know how to mix and master a finished track, you better practice the shit out of that. And if you're so wrapped up in the songwriting that you don't ever bother to mix a master track, how can you realistically, to go back to unrealistic expectations, how can you realistically expect yourself to finish a track when you haven't practiced doing so?
Yeah, you can't mix and master. You're not going to get good at mixing if you're not finishing a fucking track. And then the same thing, like, if you're finishing tracks but you're not mixing because you're like, oh, I'm over this. Well, now you're not going to get good at mixing. So they are kind of one in the same. They they do both work with each other. You gotta do both.
Amen.
Well, I'm sure it's sorry to cut you off.
Well, I was gonna mention that's a good point too, Luke, is like have a fucking playlist of tracks you've written in the past. There's nothing more fun for me than I'll sit there, I'll waste 2 fucking hours flipping through my computer listening to tracks from 2 years ago where I go, fuck, that's actually pretty good. Oh my God, I forgot about this. I actually really love this. And that does spark some extra creativity, and man, does it like give you some confidence in yourself where you go, damn, that was actually pretty good. Okay, I kind of want to write something like that again, or maybe I want to go back into that project.
Yeah, and actually, I had that exact day where I was like, what's on the bottom of this playlist? I've only been listening to the top 6 songs that I've been working on lately because I just put the new ones at the top every time I make a new draft. But it's like that track, that's just like 70 songs long all of a sudden. I'm like, what's down here at the bottom? And I went through one day at work and I listened to the entire playlist. And I was like, fuck, I got a lot of good songs. And right then, my homegirl, Sarah Connor, shouts out, Sarah, I love you, asked me to DJ her birthday party. And I was like, can I just do a whole set of all originals? And she's like, sure. I played like 50 unreleased songs. And people were like, that was a great set. And I was like, right. Like, my bar has gotten so high that I feel like I'm not good some days. And then I play my music for my friends like, you made this? This is dope. I'm like, right. Like I'm worried about this tiny detail where they hear the song idea and they're like, yes.
Yeah, that, you know, you get wrapped up in that fucking imposter syndrome. Like, man, imposter syndrome is a bitch. Those of you listening who don't know what imposter syndrome is, every single person that you ever meet in your entire life, anyone you could possibly even think of, unless they're a crazy egomaniac. Well, no, most egomaniacs come from a place of imposter syndrome, but unless they're a complete fucking sociopath where they do think they're the best person ever, everyone experiences imposter syndrome. The biggest producer you could possibly think of experiences imposter syndrome. Maybe not on a daily basis, but it comes up. And imposter syndrome is that voice in the back of your head that's telling you you're not good enough. You suck. Why are you doing this? Really? You think you're that person? You're not that person. Mm-hmm. And that voice couldn't be any more fucking wrong. Like, I don't know what part of our monkey brain developed that. I would assume it comes out of like some evolutionary fear.
Yeah,
like
don't be shunned from the tribe.
Yeah, don't be shunned from the tribe. Yeah, it definitely comes from
get eaten by wolves.
Yeah, don't show the tribe your ass snare.
Yeah,
it's 3dB too loud.
Yeah,
if you're not redlining, you're headlining. Like, yeah, like that's where it comes from. Is the fear of rejection, and for some reason we have this, you know, innate response of just wanting to shit on ourselves and want us to, you know, talk ourselves out of the fear of rejection, which is really what it is. It's like, we don't want to be rejected. So our mind is going to do Jedi mind tricks and flip around and figure out how we can get ourselves out of a position to not be so risky and put everything we have out on the line. Whatever we can do to avoid that rejection and just stay in our normal state and just go through life and be as normal as possible to not be rejected. Our brain's going to try to do that. And it's so important to fight that mindset and that imposter syndrome, because that's the thing that holds you back the most, is that fear of rejection, is the fear that you don't think you're good enough, which plays into what Tesco was saying prior, that he's experienced, and so have I. Is like, you got to shut that voice up sometimes, and just do the fucking work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
do the work.
One thing I want to kind of bring it to and ask you about is, so earlier we were talking about massaging your ideas and giving them enough love and not always starting new stuff. And I think that's really important, because certain things in the production process can only be learned at that stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, certain finishing techniques you're only going to learn by starting the day with your full mental CPU available and going at a half finished track and not starting a new idea. Now, I think it's really interesting because the deeper I've got into production, the stuff that I've learned that's suitable for the later stages of the process. So certain shit I've learned through improving my mix downs or masters I've been able to take with me to the earlier stages of the writing process and be able to plan things out a little better. And so I'm curious, I know you said you feel like your songwriting has maybe stagnated a little, but having gone through so many mix and masters and working with so many different artists who are at different levels and all that, what have you taken away from solely just kind of focusing on those last couple stages of the finishing process? And like, what have you taken from that and like brought to your writing process nowadays?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually I was doing a webinar for a while, which I think I still have it out that you can get for free. That kind of touched on this a little bit. The biggest thing that I've learned with working with other producers and mixing with them is it ties right into sounds. Like how you have no fucking idea how important choosing the right sound is. And I go through this entire webinar talking about that. I first start off with so I've taken the idea of pink noise mixing and I've turned it into my own style of mixing, which I think I've been able to establish with my clients. So I do a little bit more than mixing with my clients. If a client comes to me and they have a track that they want to mix and I listen to it and I go, okay, this isn't quite there. The sound's not really there. And I actually have an A and B player that people can go check out on my website at enviousaudio.com. You can scroll down and you'll see my portfolio and you can click before and after and listen to the mix before and the mix after. And you can hear on some of those where I went in and I talked to my client and I said, hey, I think we need to switch up some sounds and do some different layering. And when we did those different layers, the life of the track came out. It turned into an okay track into holy shit, this is fucking great. And the mix just came together like a puzzle piece. So what I like to teach people is starting out with pink noise mixing. And if you've pink noise mixed everything, you should get a good feel for the track where you go, okay, this is in a good spot. This is sounding pretty good. If I add some processing, we're done here. If you listen to it and you go, something's off, like something doesn't feel right with the leads or something, that means you probably don't have the right sounds. And so you need to go back through your sounds and start going through and finding something that's going to fit better. Different wave shapes, compared to, you don't want to stack 30 saws on top of each other. You get all these phasing and just doesn't sound good.
Super saw.
Yeah. So,
but if you distort the phasing enough, it just becomes a wall of sound anyways. Right?
True, yeah, I guess so. Artistic choice. But once you figure out those sounds, all of a sudden the leveling you just did just gets even fucking better. And then once you start adding the processing, the fun stuff, right? All the reverbs and saturation and distortion, then the processing just, it's like the last 20%. So I used to think leveling was 80% of the mix, and processing was like 20%. I now think that leveling's about 40% of the mix. Sound selection is the other 40%, and the last 20% is going to be processing.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
If you don't have the right fucking sounds, your mix is not going to come together.
Dude, there is a saying, a phrase that I like to use on this podcast semi-regularly, and that is, the best sounding mix you've ever done was also the easiest.
Yes.
And it's not because you just got better. You might have gotten a little better, but no, it's because you chose the perfect sounds that work with each other without breaking out the fine tools and the hammers and chisels and stuff. All those stones fit together just perfectly already. And then you just use a little mortar, a little grout, a little sanding, and then you got this perfect architecture.
Yeah. It's that massaging the idea out, right? Oh, there's my cat in the background, by the way.
Hey,
he's looking for little snacks.
Pumpkin or pizza, dude?
Pumpkin. That's Pumpkin. That's Pumpkin in the background.
Hey,
he's very curious. He loves to snoop around while I'm on camera all the time. I
should have brought my cat into the studio.
But yeah, that's the idea of massaging the idea, right? Like if you don't have the right sounds, start with changing the fucking sounds. And And that's where the mix, like, that's the biggest thing I've taken away from, I mean, I've mixed hundreds of tracks now, an obscene amount of fucking tracks at this point, and close to 80% of the tracks I get don't have the right sounds. A lot of the times I have to ask producers, and if they're okay with it, I'll go in and I'll go, let me switch some things around, send the idea over to you and see how you like it. And usually whatever I can come up with is everything starts fitting together. It makes the mix way fucking easier, makes it more simple. A lot of the times I get producers where they have too much layering. It's like, dude, let's take 4 of these sounds away. And now we have no more phasing. Now the snare is sticking out more. Now everything's a lot more clear and vibrant, and we can get the energy out. We can push the limiter a little bit harder. It's not as crunched down.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson to learn, and one that takes a long time for you to be able to do yourself. But like, as you're getting to that final stage of finishing a draft, you keep adding some more layers or this or that, and you're like, oh, it's better because it's thicker, it's louder, it sounds more chunky. Like, your first impression is that it's better, and then as you finish the song, like, you have to be okay with being honest about whether that layer needs to be there, because a lot of times the thing that you add that you're like, oh, it's louder and beefier, and then at the end you're like, not asking is it louder or beefier, but like, is it cleaner? Is the intent of that group, the layers, is the intent portrayed better without that? And you can process it to make it better afterwards.
Yeah. And you know, I want to talk about that, because I've got another theory that I've kind of come up with. I mean, it's probably, I shouldn't say I came up with it. I probably got someone else has also came up with the idea.
Theory and
you guys copyright. Fucking copyright. No, I don't want to hear I don't want to see anyone posting on Reddit. All right.
Plug your ears. You're not even allowed to hear the word.
To steal from your podcast, you got to steal like an artist.
Yeah, dude, I do have an episode on Steal Like an Artist. That fucking book is incredible. No, so what I've learned from songwriting, the biggest thing that producers struggle with is the sound selection. Now, getting back to the layering, which ties right into the sound selection. If you keep layering and layering, you get to a point where you start going, okay, I need to start EQing some of these sounds. And so you start EQing the sounds, and all of a sudden you go, well, now it's too thin. I need another layer. So you add a layer on top and you go, well, now that's conflicting with that, I need to EQ that sound. And you start EQing that one. And now it's too thin again. Now you need to add another. So like, you get into this never ending rabbit hole of adding a layer, EQ, getting thin, add a layer, EQ. Like, so
I did that today. I did that today for like 4 hours.
Producers, stop fucking doing this. So like, number one. Number one.
Intervention.
This is about to be an intervention for you. So
please, I need it.
The number one thing I can teach producers is you don't need to fucking EQ. Like, you don't, this is another like dogmatic thing that's been built in the industry, and that I think producers have seen through like other big producers with these crazy fucking EQ notches. That's like, which I think is sometimes overrated. There's a huge mixing engineer, I can't remember his name, but he's never EQs. He's never put EQ on it, and he's been on a bunch of platinum records that he's mixed. And I started adopting
not a single EQ, not one.
It's making me doubt all my life choices.
I want to
no EQ.
I have beef with this person.
I will find, dude. I'll fucking find. I will find.
Does he multi-band compress everything to EQ it? Like,
I don't know.
Like,
so
how do you?
Well, here's the thing. No, this gets to this idea of sound selection. Okay, so I don't do a lot of EQ. I'll do some subtle EQ. I'll do some boosting occasionally. Very rarely. But then I'll cut out the really high highs and I'll cut out the lows. But that's most of the EQ that I do. And this falls into the idea, again, if you over EQ, all EQ is destructive EQ. If you over EQ, things start sounding thin. And this forces you into adding a layer. And then it collides with something else. And so you get into this never ending loop. And then next thing you know, you're 3 hours in the track, you're ear fatigued because you might be turning the song up every once in a while, turning it down, then you're adding layers and you're EQing, and next thing you know, you're like, fuck, I'm exhausted. I'll check this out tomorrow and see how it is. Then you put your headphones on and you're like, this is fucking ass. And it's because you went through this loop and you've got this ear fatigue and it's not working. When in reality, if you just didn't put any fucking EQ and you stuck with adding fewer sounds, but bigger sounds, right? So the sound design is where you're going to get the big, nice sound. And once you start adding the processing with saturation is how you can beef it up and make it sound bigger. But don't EQ. This is why I can tell, like, don't EQ and just work on trying to find another sound that fits with that layer that fits like a glove, where they're not conflicting with each other because they're different wave shapes and maybe they don't work in the same frequency space, but they play off of each other really fucking well. And you can do some tricks with saturation and delays and whatnot and reverb to kind of get the different spaces out of that. But that puts you into this space, into this idea of like, you're not adding crazy fucking layers that's just wasting frequency space and thinning out other instruments. So then you add EQ to shit and it thins that out. And like, again, you get into
So let me ask you something, because I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying. And I just want to flip it kind of on the opposite side of the coin and hear your thoughts on this, because I'll also have a lot of students where maybe they'll have 10 tracks in their project and they're trying to stretch that out over 5 minutes, 7 minutes sometimes, and try to make these really complex pieces of music. And
very creative.
You can do some automation and stuff like that. But I'm curious because I found in the last couple of years, the sweet spot for me is kind of like 60-ish tracks, depending on the genre. And sometimes it could even be double that. And I try not to go double that, but I've definitely noticed like, I'm not saying it can't be done, but like 15 tracks maybe. Like, I just find for me, it's kind of hard to get everything to pop how I need it, when I need it, get the little distinctions and nuances from the sections. I'm curious, like, have you found maybe you do more automation, maybe you go more on the layering, maybe you do this or that? When you have the clients who have the songs where like the idea's there, but it's just not like cohesive. It almost feels like not even cohesive. It just doesn't like grow how it should. Like the chorus just doesn't hit, or like, this little transition swoosh that was supposed to bring us from this section to that section. Like, it, to me, it almost feels like constrained by the speakers, and it feels kind of like small. And I'm just curious, have you found for like clients that come with these like demo kind of unfinished tracks, maybe where the mix isn't all the way there, like is there a certain amount of like layers where is just a dead giveaway, you're like, that's too little? And sorry to like add a double to this, but I'm curious, like, from the layer side, and then also, like, what do you look for, like, when you talk about the right sound selection? How do you put that into words for people? Like, what is the right sound?
Okay, so getting a track where, like, knowing what is a good amount of tracks in a project, that depends. I'd say it depends on the genre. If you're talking dubstep, you're probably going to have close to, like, fucking 50 to 70 tracks, because you've got all this complex, like, pull this synth away, bring this one in. It's a lot of complex shit going on. And, all the sweeps and transitions, that could just be 30 tracks alone of just sweeps and transition shit. And that's okay. But when you're talking about layering, I find it depends. So it depends. Like, if you can get a really strong sound, that's a thick sound just from the sound itself, you could accomplish something with one sound. That is possible. So it also depends on the genre. There's also no rule book. But I find usually around 3 layers is the sweet spot. Maybe 4, but that's usually the sweet spot. And when you're choosing the right sounds, what's important to focus on is sounds that are just different enough from each other where they don't conflict, they don't cause phasing, and you don't get sucked into that loophole of EQ and then needing to add another layer. Really what you want to look for is something that's not quite the same wave shape, that's a little different, and might not be in the exact register. And that's where you're going to get stuff that really resonates and kind of glues together. And I wish, so I had this client track, and it's on my portfolio. It's a Megan Thee Stallion remix that a client of mine did, which anyone listening to this, again, you can go in my portfolio and listen to that track there. And
sorry, just real quick, 1 second. I just realized, could you clarify register for maybe the people that don't fully get? What do you mean by
by register? Yeah. So what I'm talking about there is like, okay, if you have a super saw that's sitting around the 3K range, you're probably not going to want to layer that with another sound that's sitting around the 3K range. You might want to dip that down to somewhere around like 600 hertz or maybe 1,000 hertz. So it's not playing in the same frequency space, right? You're not hitting the exact same notes in that space. You can do that. Again, no rule book. If you do go that route where they're going to hit the exact same notes in the same register, the same, at C2, everything's right within those octaves. Well, if you're going to go that route and layer it that way, you better choose a sound that is not also a super saw. It has to be something different. That's how you're going to get that glue. Otherwise, if you go with something that's similar to that sound, that's where you're going to have the issues where you're like, it's conflicting now. Now I need to EQ it. And then it gets too fucking thin. And now you got to add another layer. So that's the importance of like just choosing the right sounds, is try to find something a little different and a little weird. And that might not be, maybe it's an octave down from what the normal notes are playing. But like I was saying, I had that client track, which again, if you go listen to that, you can hear the clear difference. I took her, I want to say, I think all of the, I removed like 2 layers, added 2 new ones, and the sub that I added plays the exact same notes as the main lead, but it's down like 2 octaves, and it has this modulated wah, 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 compared to like she had a super saw that was like do, 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 do. And so having that modulation there at a lower register, it's more of a sub sound layered under that, it fucking pulled everything together where it was like, oh my God, okay, the idea is coming out. This is now we're in the right space. And so then I took another layer, and again, playing the same sound, but it was at a different octave than the sub and a different octave than the normal lead. And that one was, again, a modulated sound similar to the sub, but it was a faster modulation, and it was more of a high-pitched bass house womp sound. And I removed a couple of notes, so it didn't play all of the same ones, and I added some difference to it. But adding that on now just added this extra, like, it just complemented everything else. So it's like finding those sounds where they're not all sitting in the same space, they're not all the same wave shape, and maybe some are modulated compared to others. That's enough difference where it can sound pleasant following the same notes. But finding those sounds, that's how they fit like a glove. And again, that's part of the massaging process as well, is like, what can I layer with this that's completely different, that might be at a lower octave, and maybe it's just, it's modulated a little. Let's see what that does. That's part of that massaging process to kind of figure out how sounds will work. And honestly, the more you do that, that's how you figure out what sounds work with each other. Again, finding what sounds work is something that just takes time. It's just like practice that you have to work on for years and years.
Amen.
Yeah, that's all really, really awesome advice. I think, oftentimes you'll get people who will get their mind blown at like a festival or something, and they'll go to a really like dope dubstep set or something and get really inspired to write dubstep, and not fully sometimes realize like the level of depth and intricacy that goes into a genre like that. Just as far as like channels, like how you said there might be 30 channels of just different effects. And then on top of that, you also have layering certain synths, you have automating, you have checkerboarding, bringing things in and out. It can get very overwhelming. And I'm curious, like, to hear a little bit more about your music background, kind of like, what was your progression? Because I know that I came in wanting to make dubstep, and it took me a couple years to get to that point. And I didn't always love the advice of like, make a new genre or something, because I was like, fuck that, I want to do my thing. But the longer I've been in it and the more I've just naturally experimented, I found it's really helped. And you know, certain things will carry regardless of genre. But you know, either way, I just want to talk a little bit about, like, for the people that are maybe working on a little more complex styles of EDM, like, what can they take away to, I don't want to say have an easier, like, growth process, but like anything from psychology wise to production to whatever, to like, how does somebody go in that might not have that skill and make that like amazing bass music they've always dreamed of?
Yeah. Okay, so what lies within complexity is simplicity. It, like, complex stuff is not as complex as you might see, as it might seem. Within that are, like, you're playing, right? You might checkerboard a bunch of shit where you have a bunch of turnaround stuff, but everything's playing the same note. It's just a different sound every time. Some of those sounds are modulated a little faster than other ones, and maybe they have pitch bends and little automation stuff. And those are all the little bells and whistles. But take away those bells and whistles, and what you get is something like bam, bam, wah, wah. Like, it's just very rudimentary and very simple. And I used to be of the mindset of like, nope, I'm going to write one genre. This is the one genre I want to blow up in. I'm going to become like the best at writing that genre. And I think it's a fairly ignorant thing to think, because there's so much you can learn from experimenting with different genres. And this is where, honestly, if you want to hear something fucking crazy, but I full-heartedly believe it, go write some fucking pop music and tell me how easy that is. Pop music is arguably one of the most difficult genres to write, because what you need in pop music is simplicity, but it needs to be everything has to be a hook. Every single part of that song has to be a hook, because by the time you get to the 2-minute part where it like basically ends, or you're going into the bridge and then outro, by the end of that song, people need to go repeat. Like, that is what makes a pop song good, is they hit the repeat button, because it's so catchy, it's so simple, and you'll hum the melody all goddamn day. If you can write pop music well, you can almost, as an electronic music producer, if you want to be a dubstep producer, go write fucking pop music and learn how to write pop music, because that's how you learn simplicity. And you take that simplicity to the dubstep level, where you go, where can I take this simplicity and take it the extra mile and make it a little more complex? Because then you have that simple muscle worked out, where you can write something catchy and simple and just start tweaking it, add another layer, like just start playing around. But complexity, you have to first start with simplicity, because everything is simple, and that the best thing is simple, right? The best music you've probably ever listened to is simple to an extent, I should say. Like, everything makes sense though. Like, when you hear a really good song, everything's in its rightful place and everything just makes sense. And that's the simplicity of it all.
Yeah, simplicity isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a very common misconception.
What were we talking about? Animals. Everyone fucking loved Animals. That's probably one of the most simple tracks you could possibly write. Like, it's very basic.
Very well executed simplicity.
Yes. Yeah.
And the more crazy crap you put in a song, the harder it is to bring that home in the engineering stage anyways. And like, songwriting is songwriting, but production and engineering are about what you can actually pull off.
Yeah.
So like, if, like you said, a lot of your clients, it's like, hey, how about we just cut a bunch of these layers out, and then it can be engineered to completion.
I've had artists that come to me with crazy complex stuff where I'm like, I understand what you're trying to go with, but I'm telling you, like, from my experience, like, you came to me for a reason, right? I'm in this position. You came to me, you're paying me for a reason. Now, like, you should listen to me, because if we cut all of this out and maybe replace a couple of things, this is going to go where you want it to go. Like, it's not where you want it to be right now because you added, or I should say, yeah, it's not where you want it to be because you add all this complex stuff, right? It's in a place where you don't want it to be. You want it to be somewhere else. Well, what you have done, yeah, what you have done is not going to get you to where you want it to be. So we need to go at this from a different angle. But yeah, I've gotten tracks where it's obscenely complex, to the point where it's even like, it's not so complex as it is chaotic. You know, it starts going to that chaotic space, especially with layering, where it's like you're getting all this phasing and it's causing so many other issues that we need to, like, let's step back a little bit and start at step one.
Yeah, there's a fine line, and complexity is lost amongst other complexity. There's a reason most of your favorite artists that make complex music, the most complex sound in that entire song is when everything else drops out. Yeah. And you maybe have that one sound in a sub bass, and you hear the complexity and the detail of that sound because it would just get lost amongst everything else.
And it's simple. Like the melody that's playing is probably simple. And honestly, where that complexity is more than likely coming from the processing and the automation done with the processing. It's not necessarily coming from the sound design or the notes chosen. It's probably
or how many things you stacked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's coming from the processing, right? What did we talk about before? You start with leveling. If the leveling is good, then you continue to processing. But if the leveling is done and the sounds don't fit, go back to the sounds. And once the sounds are good, then get to the processing. That's where your complexity is going to come from.
Yeah. Amen. Let's,
that was, yeah. I was gonna say this would be a great bow tie to the episode. I appreciate your in-depth answer on that, because I know we touched on a couple things there, but yeah, I feel like honestly we touched on so many good points today that I feel like address so many different aspects, from production to business to marketing, and then within production, I feel like there's just a wide range of like different skill levels, mixing, mastering stuff, songwriting. So yeah, I definitely, really appreciate you giving so much of your insight, and also appreciate you personally attacking me there with the imposter syndrome and all that. No, but I think we had a really real conversation and a lot of gems in here. So yeah, thank you for taking the time. And honestly, we should do this again, because I feel like we got episodes and episodes worth of gems.
Oh yeah, no, I could go for fucking 6 hours. I could turn this into JRE right now and just go 4 fucking hours talking about it, because I love this shit. And like, we barely even scratched on the marketing surface, which is that's where a lot of my knowledge is, where I could talk forever. Again, I've got probably over 100 hours on my podcast where it's like mostly marketing and business stuff. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you bringing me on. And yeah, this is a ton of fun. Like I said, I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, just real quick, remind the people where to find you online.
Yeah, so all my socials, I'm mostly active on Instagram. You can find me at Envious Audio, or Envious Audio on Instagram. So Instagram.com/Envious Audio, which is my mixing and mastering business. And then if anyone needs any mixing or mastering help, go to enviousaudio.com, just fill out my form, and then listen to Electronic Dance Money. Like I said, you guys are in a really good place right now with the Producer Dojo. Those of you who are in the Producer Dojo, you've got a lot of really great teachers, a lot of great people teaching you a lot of production and mixing stuff. And I know you guys also touch on marketing, but that podcast is strictly business and marketing for EDM producers. So if you feel like you're ready to dip into that, there's over 100 hours. I just released episode 81. Don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And new episodes release every 2 weeks, every other Friday. So next Friday, a new episode will be coming out. And if you're going to start on that, I have people hit me up and they go, "Oh yeah, I started from episode 1." Don't start from episode 1. And the reason why I say that is it's a loose guide. Like because if you start at episode 1, wherever you're at in your process, if you need to promote a track, the first episode is about selling beats. You're not really gonna learn how to promote your track off of episode 1. So like, just go through, find what sounds interesting or where you're at in your songwriting process, or like if you're promoting a track, find an episode that's about promoting your track. So like, don't go through chronologically, bounce around, find out, look at where you're at right now and what episode might help you. And also hit me up if you have any questions. Feel free. I'm happy to help anyone out.
And if you're struggling to finish your track, but it's dope, just hire the man to engineer it.
Yeah, this is I'll tie this off too, real quick. I'll make this quick. Luke, you had mentioned something about, if you're struggling with songwriting or something, you might need to do more songwriting. Producers, this is another dogmatic thing that we've had stuck in our head forever. It's okay. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do everything and be it all. You don't have to be the songwriter, the producer, the vocal engineer, the mixing engineer, the mastering engineer, the marketer, the promote. Like, you don't have to do all of that. There are other people that can do that. If you're struggling with songwriting, don't be afraid to hire someone to help you out with songwriting. If you're struggling with vocal producing, don't be afraid to hire someone that can. If you want your music to be the best that it can be, people build teams, and teams are what get you to the end of the finish line. So if you want to be the best that you could possibly be, start building a team, finding people that have have strengths than your weaknesses, and that can help you grow and be better producers. So don't be afraid to look to third-party sources.
Just gold nuggets right till the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for real.
All right. Then the way we sign this off, we give everybody a peace and a peace among worlds.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love you.
I like it.
Thank you, humans, for being here with us and Christian Caicedo. Make sure to go check out his podcast, Electronic Dance Money, and follow him at Envious Audio on Instagram. You can see him at enviousaudio.com and find the podcast at enviousaudio.com/podcast. His song of the week is Beat Eater by Hypedelic. You can get the links to that. Christian engineered that, and it got released on Hybrid Trap. That's a big deal. You can also find that and all the other songs of the week on our Spotify playlist, linked below. And support our sponsors while you're down there. Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo senseis. Tesco's Patreon, where you can get access to his Discord, track feedback, private lessons, and more. The weekly download, where you can learn from our mentor Ilgates and his private weekly group lessons, and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. And of course, guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. There's more episodes, socials, and free sound packs at thehumanmusicpodcast.com. But until next week, peace. Peace among worlds.